A family hike ended in tragedy, and the killer confessed in a barbershop chair. But what he admitted last is the part no one can forget. If you love unraveling cases like this, make sure you're subscribed. It was July 26, 2025. The Brink family went hiking at Devil's Den State Park. It's a scenic place, known for waterfalls and caves, the kind of quiet escape people love on summer weekends. Clinton and Christen Brink packed a picnic, snapped happy photos, and watched their 2 little girls chase butterflies along the trail. But just after lunch, the laughter stopped. There were sudden screams, chaos on the rocks, and a desperate scramble through the forest. When the dust settled, both parents were found gravely injured, and soon, news came that they did not survive. In a nightmare that no parent could imagine, Christen's quick thinking had managed to keep her daughters safe, but at the cost of her own life and her husband's. Investigators arrived, and the hunt began immediately. Hours later, a neighborhood barbershop, miles from the park, would become a crime scene of its own. A quiet man, well known in town, was taken into custody, and then he said something chilling. He confessed. The community was shocked. The suspect was someone they trusted. But why? How did the investigation leap from a single 911 call on a forest trail to a rapid arrest at a barber's chair? Stay with us. We'll tell you exactly how it unfolded, minute by tense minute. Meet the Brinks, Clinton and Christen, a happily married couple, and 2 little girls, Emma and Lily. By profession, Clinton was an engineer, Christen a devoted elementary school teacher. Every weekend, they go out on a family hike. On this Saturday morning, the girls woke up early, packed small backpacks with sandwiches, and, camera in hand, ready to explore. Devil's Den State Park was their destination, a beloved Arkansas state park nestled in the Ozark Mountains. The forest there is dense with pine and oak, with the sound of waterfalls in the distance and hidden limestone caves off the beaten path. Locals often describe it as a place for waterfalls, caves, and escape from the city. That morning, the air was warm and crisp. Sunlight filtered through the canopy. Wildflowers dotted the edge of the trail. As they drove in, the girls lined up stuffed animal toys. Christen pointed out deer grazing near the road. "Look, Mama," Lily giggled. Clinton smiled and snapped a quick photo. The atmosphere was light. So light it felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. They parked at the old stone parking lot and set out on foot. Christen carried the picnic basket. Clinton had the camera slung around his neck. Emma skipped ahead, twirling in the dappled sunlight, while little Lily waddled behind, picking up pine cones. As they wound down the trail of many steps, they'd wave at familiar faces. A veteran hiker with a walking stick who always said hello, a young couple who brought their dog. It was just a normal family hike, or so it seemed. Unbeknownst to the Brinks, they were not entirely alone. About 20 minutes into the hike, another pair of eyes watched them from a distance. A teenage girl named Emily. She glanced over and saw a man standing near a boulder about 50 yards away. He was tall, with dark hair and jeans, standing very still. He had an unsettling, dead stare expression, neither smiling nor frowning, just watching. Soon the Brinks were obscured by a bend in the trail. Christen snapping photos of Emma with a waterfall in the background. Christen adjusted Lily's sun hat and called, "Steady now, sweetie." Clinton chatted about their weekend plans. They had mapped out only a short loop hike, nothing strenuous. Behind them, a stranger lingered on the trail. Dressed in plain clothes, blending into the forest. At that point, no one in the woods realized this stranger's sighting would become crucial evidence. But by the end of the day, it would be the last time anyone saw Clinton and Christen Brink alive. Suddenly, the afternoon calm was shattered. Multiple hikers would later recount how they heard screams echo through the canyons. One witness, the girl, Emily, emerged from the trees ahead of the family. She turned a corner and froze at the sight of chaos. A man, the stranger, lunging at Christen Brink, who was struggling on the ground. Clinton had tried to pull the girls behind him, but the man had pushed him back. Emily later described Christen's face twisted in horror as she shielded her children. The attack was swift and brutal. Emily shouted and ran to help. "No, stop, please!" Christen screamed, clutching Emma and Lily close as the assailant struck again. The children, tiny and terrified, couldn't fully comprehend what was happening. Emma babbled, "Mommy, why is he hurting you?" Lily whimpered and hid her face against her mother's chest. Christen fought to draw the man away from her daughters, yelling with every bit of her strength. Clinton, though wounded and off balance, shielded Emma with his body as the man swung at them. In that instant, nothing else existed, just the raw terror of a mother protecting her kids. We won't linger on the grisly details. What's important is what happened next, a parent's love and quick thinking. With a surge of adrenaline, Christen threw an arm over Emma and Lily, dragging them away from the clearing. She cried, "Go! Go!" Emma and Lily, confused and scared, scrambled after their mother. Christen, although injured, backed away into the trees, pulling the girls behind her knees. She could hear Clinton moan behind them. He had been struck with a heavy blow. In the meantime, Emily had already dialed 911 from her cell phone. The little girls had never run so fast. Lily wailed, "Mommy, run!" Christen limped as best she could, sprinting downhill on narrow footpaths that only a local would know. She placed the girls in the shade of a pine grove and told them, "Stay here, I'll be back." Panting but determined, Christen hopped over rocks and brambles to reach the ranger station. Blood seeped through her shirt. She had been cut, but she didn't stop. By the time help arrived, EMTs found Christen conscious, huddled over her two daughters. The girls were safe, but Christen collapsed from exhaustion. Paramedics tried to stabilize Clinton at the scene and raced Christen to the hospital, and the girls were taken over to the ranger station. In the dark of that afternoon, one single thread of hope carried the story forward. The children were alive. Christen's bravery, her decision to shield and then save her daughters, was the miracle that gave investigators the one chance of lead. But how had Christen managed to escape with the girls? How had she flagged down help so quickly? Who was that man on the trail? The words of parkgoers who saw him just hours before the attack would soon set detectives on a path that led them straight toward a shocking suspect. Within minutes of Emily's frantic call, first responders were racing through the park. The trail was quickly sealed off by state troopers. An ambulance sped Christen to a nearby hospital, while park rangers and deputies fanned out searching the woods. Dozens of worried hikers and picnickers looked each other in horror. Many had no idea what had just happened, only that the forest had become a crime scene. Detectives moved in immediately. They crouched in the tall grasses, photographing the scene of the attack. Forensics technicians collected any scrap of evidence: a dropped lipstick, a lone baseball cap stained with blood, a footprint in the dirt. Every small detail could be a clue. The investigators set up a command post in a clearing. Wire reports started flowing. The Brinks had left footprints. There were no obvious tracks of any strangers. Witnesses were the next priority. Rangers checked park cameras and parking logs. In the small ranger station, officers interviewed everyone who might have seen something. A nearby couple had heard screams and came running. They described a dark sedan speeding away down the access road just a while ago. Several hikers, including Emily, gave matching descriptions of the suspect. A white male, late 30s, medium build, wearing a black hoodie and jeans. One even drew a rough sketch of the dead stare man who had been on the trail that morning. Emily later told officers, "He looks so quiet, just there, watching us, like a deer." Meanwhile, investigators started analyzing the digital trail. Clinton had been carrying a GPS-enabled camera, but it was out of battery after all the photos he took. However, the family's cell phones were a useful lead. Investigators pinged the Brinks phones. They showed the last signal on the trail, then went silent.
Park rangers also checked the nearby park entry camera. One black sedan caught their eye, a late model car with a heavily taped-over license plate driving out of Devil's Den around noon. The partial plate numbers were logged. That evening, authorities released a public appeal. News helicopters had picked up the search activity, and soon TV stations ran the story. On air, a portrait of the suspect ran repeatedly. The community, shaken and terrified, responded immediately. Tips poured in by the hundreds, from college students who recognized the man's sketch, to an Arizona Fish and Game warden who had seen a similar car, to a neighbor who remembered a local teacher with a dark sweater. Each call to the tip line was a thread, and each thread a chance to catch the man responsible for this. Detectives chased down dozens of leads. One tip mentioned a man seen bragging about getting away from the park. Another came from a social media post about a customer's confession at a barbershop. The media had encouraged anyone in a barbershop to check strange customers that day. A breakthrough came when someone recognized the partial license from the news. It matched a vehicle registered to a local family. Law enforcement quietly checked DMV records and found the car belonged to Jason Collins, a middle school teacher. It all came together. Surveillance cameras at a strip mall showed that same black sedan, the tape still on its plate, pulling into a barbershop parking lot earlier that morning. Detectives watched the footage. The suspect climbed out of the car in his black hoodie and walked into the barbershop. The authorities moved with precision. A task force gathered. Now the question on everyone's mind: who was Jason Collins? A drifter? A local? A teacher? Maybe the community would soon wonder, did they really know him at all? One thing was certain: the arrest was coming faster than anyone expected.
Up to this moment, investigators had no solid suspect. They had faces, names, phone records, but no arrest. Then, a single tip would change everything. It wasn't some decades-old criminal or a drifter passing through. The man they were about to confront had a job, a family, a life, and a secret no one saw coming. That tip would lead them straight to a quiet barbershop and to the man whose name would soon be known to everyone. Officers traced the black sedan to a small barber shop a few towns over. Late afternoon on a weekday, the license plate still had the corners taped. The shop was quiet. Through the window, the man in the black hoodie sat in the chair, head tilted back. It was their guy. Detective and 2 state troopers took positions. SWAT quietly surrounded the building. On cue, an officer burst in. "Stay down!" Jason Collins looked up, startled. He had the face of an ordinary man, not at all the wild-eyed suspect. A neatly trimmed beard, kind eyes now wide with confusion. A trooper shouted, "Jason Collins, Illinois driver's license 2345C. You're under arrest for murder in the 1st degree. Keep your hands where we can see them." Collins rose slowly and stood, putting his hands up. Flannel shirt, jeans, the barber's apron still around his waist. No one had to draw a weapon. Handcuffs clicked. He was surprised and confused, not dangerous in his stance. Collins said only, "Officer, I don't understand." At the precinct, he was booked and photographed. He didn't ask for an attorney at first. He seemed oddly calm, even relieved. By midnight, detectives began questioning him. In the dim interview room, Collins stared at the gray table. "I want to clear something up. Look, I did go to the park that day. I encountered them on the trail." Detective Lee leaned forward. "Jason, they're saying you murdered Clinton and Christen Brink. We have eyewitnesses, we have your car, we have your DNA on the scene." Collins looked away. Finally, he whispered, I had an accident with them. It wasn't supposed to be like that." 2 hours later, the confession was in writing. Collins, visibly shaken, recounted a version of the encounter, half monotone. He admitted, "I lost it. I lost control.
"I didn't plan this." He claimed he attacked Clinton first, then turned to Christen. The detectives exchanged looks. He seemed regretful, but detached. They recorded every word. News broke at dawn. The suspect in the Brink murders, police confirmed, had confessed. Sheriff said, "Our suspect admitted to killing the couple." Moreover, DNA evidence linked him to the scene of the crime. Investigators had indeed found traces of his blood on Christen's scarf and his fingerprints on the picnic cooler. That admission, combined with the forensic matches, closed the loop that began on the trail that day. But a confession is just words. It doesn't erase the horror of what happened, nor does it explain why. Even as Collins sat in jail, questions swirled around the community. Who was Jason Collins really? And what could have driven this ordinary man to commit such an unspeakable act? Next, we'll look at the man behind the confession, his background, the desperate search for motive, and how a town is coping with the shock.
Who was this man? Reporters dug into Collins' background immediately. He was a 35-year-old math teacher at the local middle school. Neighbors described him as ordinary. One even called him the kind of guy who wears a bow tie to school. In church, he sang in the choir. On weekends, he coached youth baseball. Parents at the school remembered him as a smiling, patient educator who worked after school to tutor students. In Collins' modest home, detectives found a family photo with a wife and 2 children. Inside, a tidy desk with bills all paid, his record spotless. His Facebook posts were mundane: family barbecues, birthday cake photos, posts about test scores and lesson plans. There were no hate-filled rants, no angry diary entries, no clues of a rampage. To all appearances, Jason Collins was as unsuspecting as they come. Yet investigators had to reconcile the evidence with the man. They scoured his online activity and personal life. Did he know the Brinks? Any grudges against hikers or families? Nothing showed up. Financial records showed no stress. He wasn't deep in debt or losing a house. His wallet had plenty of cash when arrested, so robbery was out. Was there a hidden affair, some dark obsession on the internet? Police looked for any sign of planning. None. All they found was a baffling confession and a label that terrified everyone. This seemed random.
That word random haunted Winona and all the small towns around Devil's Den. A murderer in their midst, but no apparent motive? That meant the unthinkable. Even in a quiet place like this, violence could strike anyone for no reason. Parents whispered in PTA meetings, if it could happen to the Brinks, it could happen to us. Trails once bustling with families suddenly felt cold. People started walking in pairs, checking behind them. The random nature of the crime shook their sense of safety more than anything. In the town square, a vigil was held by families who once hiked together on summer weekends. Neighbors placed photos of Clinton and Christen by candlelight, joined hands, and wondered how something so horrific had come to a place like Devil's Den, a place known more for blue herons and spring-fed pools than for tragedy. The community grappled with anger and disbelief. Yet amid the grief, many also felt gratitude that the daughters had survived. Everyone agreed on one thing. Jason Collins was an enigma, a friendly face on the outside and a mystery on the inside.
Legally, the case moved swiftly after the confession and the forensic evidence. Within weeks, prosecutors filed charges and Collins entered a plea. With the confession on record and the DNA evidence tying him to the scene, a jury trial was deemed unnecessary. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was over in the legal sense, but for the community, the end of the trial did not end the pain. In a brief court statement, Christen's parents thanked the investigators and asked only for privacy. The Brink family, shattered by their loss, retreated from public view. The two little girls, Emma and Lily, the heart of this story, were taken in by their loving grandparents. School canceled classes so the community could show support. Counselors offered help to anyone traumatized by the events. Slowly, the town began to heal in its own way. Community groups sprang into action. Fundraisers were organized to help with the girls' future. Local therapists volunteered to provide trauma counseling because, after such an ordeal, mental health resources were crucial. The park itself held a memorial service near the waterfall, and conversations started about park safety. Should they install emergency call boxes, more rangers? Nothing would change what happened, but people felt they had to try something. Through it all, the Brinks family remained out of the spotlight, just as they requested. The most anyone knew for certain was that 2 innocent lives were gone, and 2 more would grow up without their parents. The ripples of that day would be felt for years to come.
This is a story of ordinary people hurt in an extraordinary way. It's about how a single day, a picnic, a hike, a mother's decision can ripple into a lifetime of questions and change. It's about bravery, Christen's love that day that saved her children, and it's about the small, everyday things that sometimes save lives, even amid tragedy. If this story moved you, please leave a kind comment below. Your words matter more than you know to families like the Brinks. If you found this deep dive helpful, please subscribe for more carefully researched true crime stories told with respect. Next week, we'll have a look at an unsolved disappearance that has puzzled investigators for a decade. Click the notification bell, and we'll see you there.